In the summer of 1914, the world was asleep. In Paris, cafes were full. In the English countryside, the hay was being brought in from the fields. In Vienna, families strolled along the Danube, listening to waltzes. The world felt more connected, more modern, more peaceful than it had ever been. 4 weeks later, it was on fire. The story we are often told about the First World War is a simple one. An archduke is assassinated in Sarajevo, a web of alliances is triggered, and a continent stumbles into a war that no one really wanted. But that's not the real story. That's the spark. The real story is about the dry timber that had been piled up for decades, waiting for a single match. It's a story about a generation that sleepwalked into a catastrophe, armed with old maps for a new world. And understanding how they did it is to understand one of the most dangerous forces in human history, the illusion of control. To see this clearly, you have to look past the soldiers in the trenches for a moment. You have to look at the ideas. At the turn of the 20th century, the leaders of Europe believed they had perfected the art of diplomacy. They had created an intricate system of alliances, a delicate balance of power designed to prevent any one nation from becoming too dominant. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy on one side, France, Russia, and Britain on the other. It was meant to be a safety net. In reality, it was a tripwire. Each treaty, each secret promise, was another wire connected to a global detonator. The system designed to keep the peace made a massive war almost inevitable. But the second piece of the puzzle is even stranger. It wasn't just treaties, it was timetables. The military leaders of the era were obsessed with one thing: mobilization, the ability to get millions of men, horses, and cannons to the front lines faster than the enemy. They had created masterpieces of logistics, complex railroad schedules that were timed down to the minute. Germany's famous Schlieffen Plan, for example, was not just a strategy, it was a continent-spanning, unchangeable train schedule. Once the order was given, millions of men and tons of material would begin moving, and there was no way to stop it, no way to pause and reconsider. The generals had built a machine that could only go forward. They thought they were masters of a game of chess, when in fact they were just the first pawns to fall. And beneath it all was a deep cultural blindness.
A generation of people had been raised on stories of glorious cavalry charges and heroic duels. They believed war was a noble, cleansing force. They believed it would be quick. "The boys will be home by Christmas," was the promise echoed in London, Berlin, and Paris. They had no concept of what was coming, no idea that machine guns would make a mockery of courage, that artillery would erase landscapes, that poison gas would suffocate hope itself. They were marching into the first industrial war with the romantic spirit of the 19th century. And so, when the Archduke was shot in June 1914, the system began to move. An ultimatum from Austria-Hungary to Serbia, a mobilization order from Russia to protect its ally, a German mobilization in response, dictated by its rigid timetables, a French declaration to honor its treaty with Russia. Each leader in each capital made what they thought was a rational, defensive, and necessary decision. No one was making a decision to start a world war. They were just making the next logical move. And that is the terrifying heart of the story. The Great War wasn't caused by a single villain or a single fatal mistake. It was caused by a system that had become too complex, too rigid, and too fast for human wisdom to control. It was a fire spreading through a house where every door had been locked from the other side. The war that followed would change the world forever. It dissolved 4 empires. It redrew the map of the Middle East and Europe. It bled a generation of its best and brightest into the mud of Flanders and the Somme. The war didn't just kill soldiers, it killed an idea. The idea that humanity was on an inevitable march of progress, the belief in glory, honor, and the wisdom of our leaders. We are still living in the cynical, complicated world that was born in those trenches. Once you see this pattern, you begin to see it everywhere. In financial systems that grow too complex to regulate, in technologies that evolve faster than our ethics, in social networks that connect us in ways we don't fully understand. We still build systems of immense complexity, interlocking them with promises and timetables, trusting that someone somewhere has their hand on the brake. The story of 1914 is a quiet reminder that sometimes nobody does. It teaches us that the greatest danger isn't always malice. Sometimes it's momentum. It's the slow drift into disaster, one logical, justifiable step at a time. Because history is not a story of what happened.
It is a warning. And the ghosts of that lost generation, the young men who thought they'd be home by Christmas, they don't ask us to remember their deaths. They ask us to understand their lesson. And maybe that's all that matters.